Thanks for being here. Like Andrew said, I'm Brandon. I'm part of Pixel Planet Studios, and we are a full-service video production company, but we do specialize in some of the CG VFX side. So this is a shot we're going to kind of focus on today. We're going to look at, I think we did about 10 shots on the 211 short, but this is one of the tricky ones that we had, and you can see back here this road closure. So everyone was here knows that we closed down a street to shoot this. And it was just kind of like, hey, we need to clean this up as well. So kind of a throw-in visual effects shot. And this is kind of a tricky one. And this would have been a really hard shot to accomplish a couple years ago. And in the last, I'd say 6 months to a year, there's been some really cool new technologies that have made doing a shot like this a lot easier. So I wanted to walk through some of those today. And so the first thing that we're going to do on this shot is create a matte painting to remove the road blockage back here. And so to do that, we're going to take a still frame into Photoshop. And if I scrub through this, you can see that the actual last frame of this shows the most of this shot that we ever see. So I'm not doing the last frame just for any other reason other than we actually see the we see the most amount of street. And so we can save an image out and open this in Photoshop. I have a little hack I like to use, which is to open the Content-Aware Fill panel and create a reference frame. And that will create a Photoshop file right next to our project file. So it's nice because it's not creating it on the desktop where 6 months from now when you open this project, you go, oh, I don't know where that is anymore. It's nice and convenient because it creates it there, it opens automatically in Photoshop, and then it already puts it on our timeline here in After Effects, which is just a nice little time saver. So Content-Aware Fill actually is a cool tool in After Effects, but a lot of times when I open the panel, it is just for that little ease of use. And so you can see this road blockage we have here now. And the reason I said this is tricky is it's not real easy to use a clone stamp tool. For those of us that have used Photoshop, that's one of the first things that we learned is that you can clone this part of the street over here. And it would be a lot of work to try to recreate all of these buildings. But about, I want to say 6 months or so ago, Adobe released Generative Fill in Photoshop. And I'm sure a lot of you probably heard about that. It was kind of a big, we had seen a lot of these AI image generations, but they were kind of these hokey AI image generation things. And this was one of the first times that professionals were like, wow, I can use this in Photoshop where it's able to recreate parts of the image and actually take into account the style of image, the lighting direction, and all these things. So I'm going to show you real quick how it works. It's very easy to use. You just kind of select a region in here. And so I'm going to come in here and select this area. Actually, maybe I'll go a little lower. I think I'm going to go under the traffic light and select all of these cars I want to remove. And sometimes you need to kind of play around with this. I'm going to come in here to make sure this car goes away. I'm going to go right next to the cop car. And so I've selected this area. And this new, I forget what Adobe calls this, something island, I believe, pops up. And you just click Generative Fill. And you can add a prompt. So you can say remove cars or empty street. Or you can just leave it blank and click Generate, which basically usually means that it's going to remove whatever you've selected. So I'm going to go in here and click Generate. And maybe we'll get lucky and the first try will just be really good. Sometimes it takes a few iterations of playing around with it, or part of it will look good and you need to paint out, you need to do a reselection. So very cool. It did some really nice stuff over here. It still has some cars in the middle here. I was hoping for an empty street. That looks pretty good. And I think this one looks pretty good. We can go with this. I'm not sure really what's going on back here. Maybe I can do another selection and see if I can get something that looks a little emptier. And this does generate, I believe, in the cloud. So Just a thing to know when you're doing this, like you do need internet to be able to do it. So this looks pretty good, especially for how quick this shot is going to move. And so I'm just going to save this file, Control S, and I'll exit out of Photoshop. And this frame should reload. If it doesn't, we can tell it to reveal in the project, and I will reload it. Okay, so here we have our empty street. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to freeze frame this so that I can drag it all the way down our entire composition. And so I'm going to now use the pen tool and create a mask of the area that we want to add this into. And I will do something like this. I'm going to come right up to this cop car. And I'll turn this back on. I'll feather this a few pixels. Okay, and now we have this, but of course it doesn't move with our camera. So there's a couple different ways you can try to track shots. What I found for this shot is that Mocha worked really well. So of people who have used After Effects, can I have a show of hands of how many people have stayed away from Mocha because it seemed like a little intimidating versus some of the other tracking things in After Effects? I would put my hand up because I was absolutely the same way before I started using Mocha, and now I actually use it for a lot of things in After Effects. So I'm not sure exactly how long, 5 years ago or so, maybe longer than that, they added a free version of Mocha into After Effects, and it's called Mocha AE. And it's really powerful. It can do a lot of the things that you would use the Mocha Pro to do. And so I'm going to click our footage, and I'm going to open up Mocha AE. It's just an effect you can drag on, or I believe you can also come up to animation and track in Boris FX Mocha. So I'm going to open Mocha AE. One note I would say when you do this is that you want your footage to be the same size as your comp. So if you've scaled down your footage or you have some sort of move, I would recommend pre-composing it so that it's the exact same size as your comp. It will just make your life a little bit easier. And so if I scroll through here, we want to track this area in the background. And so the first thing we want to do is track or garbage mat the things in the foreground that will pass in front of that we can tell the track that we're eventually going to do to ignore. So basically, I'm going to draw a mask or a spline, it's called, around this getaway car. And I'm going to track this forward. And that does a pretty good job. I might add a keyframe here and then drag this so it creates another keyframe so that this is kind of garbage matted there. And then I'm going to go backwards. Okay, so now we have this spline that moves around this, and I'll call this just car. And then I'm going to create another one around the cop car. So even though our matte painting, doesn't extend behind this cop car, I want to be able to track some of the area that goes behind the cop car to help give us clues about how the camera is moving. So I'm going to drag this below this car, and actually I might just do a couple keyframes here because we don't see it for very long. And then I want to also do the same thing for this cop. And so for the cop car, I'm going to, where it starts over here, I'm going to click this button to select layer in so that it disappears and doesn't try to add the spline over in this area. So I'm going to call this one cop car. And the guys from Pixel Planet know I always name all of my layers and project files correctly all the time, right? They're giving a thumbs up, agreeing with me, I see. All right, so we all obviously pick up bad habits when we're trying to work really fast, but it can be really important to name your files and your layers. It is really nice when you go back in the project. Okay, so here we have our cop, and I'm just going to drop a couple things of movement in here. I'll select this so the layer in starts here, and then once she gets to here, we'll end it. Okay. So if you tried to, some of you may have done like a 3D camera tracker or a 2D track or like a four-corner tracker, like for a cell phone or something like that. But those types of tracking methods usually need like consistent pixels that you can continue to track. The 3D camera tracker can sometimes get away better with that type of without having to do that. But if you look at this, like the background area that we want to track, there's not consistently parts in frame, but if we draw this spline in the background at the beginning here, it might be able to pick up some of this background area and some of this background area, and have enough context clues of how the camera is moving because of that. So I guess I should take a step back too and explain the difference between like Mocha and some of those other trackers. So Mocha is a planar tracker, meaning that it's meant to track surfaces. Now, we're not going to perfectly track one plane, but because it's far enough in the background, we're going to be able to get away with kind of a flat plane of this matte painting, right? So we could try to take it maybe a step further and like track some buildings along this plane and maybe track some empty space, or in this plane back here. But again, we're going to be able to get away with like one kind of flat, like imagine putting like a card in the background. Sometimes the key to visual effects is being able to get away with it. If people watch it and go, wow, that's convincing, then you've done your job. It's not always about everything being absolutely perfect if you can get away with it, right? It's a bit of a magic act. Okay, so I'm going to draw, maybe I'll come here to the end, and I'm going to turn off these gear icons. So these gear icons will tell, when we click this track button, it will tell Mocha to track those. And we've already set these up as like garbage mats. Again, these are the things that this new track is going to ignore. And I'm going to kind of create a bigger area than our actual matte painting is going to be, so that we're analyzing all of these things in the background here. And let's go with this, and we'll call this background. And because I've moved background under all of these other layers, it will ignore all of the other layers, right? So it's not going to look at where the cop car is. It's not going to look at the getaway car when it goes in front of it. So sometimes this takes a little bit of guessing and testing. Hopefully we'll get lucky and this first track will look pretty solid. So maybe I'll raise this up a bit so we can keep some of this telephone pole. All right, so let me track backwards. And that looked pretty good to me. I can put up this grid as well to kind of see how this is staying. And it looks to be moving pretty well. So I'm going to come here to this last frame, and I'm going to click this button, which is Show Planar Surface. I'm going to turn off this grid. And then I'm going to stretch this to the edge bounds of the frame. I will explain why in a little bit, why this process works, but whatever frame you do your original matte painting on is the frame that you would want to click this for. So if I go here, it's going to, if we create our matte painting on 101, that's where we would want that's where we would want to click this button for. So I'm going to do it on the last frame, and I'm going to click Save. And now we've created our track data. And the way we're going to apply this is through Mocha, and it's going to use a corner pin effect. And I will come in here to tracking data, create track. I'm going to use that background one that we made. I'm sorry the writing is so small on this. I was able to increase the text size for everything else, but Mocha seems to kind of play by its own rules. Okay, so I've selected that track data for the background, and we're going to, there's a couple ways you can apply it, corner pin with motion blur and transform. So actually we are going to use corner pin with motion blur, and I'm going to apply that to the reference frame. And it's worth noting that the reference frame is also, because we created it from this comp, this reference frame is also the same size as the composition. So if I deleted this mask, you would see that it's the exact same size as the composition. Same thing applies because this is, it's going to, when I can just go ahead and apply and show you. I'm going to apply that export. And now you see that this is moving with the shot. And it did this by adding this corner pin effect. So it's using the corner pin effect to move change the aspect of that matte painting we created. If that's confusing, the big thing to know is that the size, having the footage and the matte painting be the exact size of your comp is important for using this method. So if I unsolo this, you'll see that this is moving pretty well in the shot now, right? And the big thing that we need to do now is to roto the car and the police officer so that they go in front of the matte painting. So I'm going to use a built-in tool called Rotobrush to cut those out. So I will duplicate the footage, and I will call this car. And then with my Rotobrush tool selected, we are going to double-click on this new footage layer I created. And I'm going to come back until I can see the whole car. And I'm going to just paint on this car now. And while I do this, I'll explain that Adobe came out with Rotobrush around 10 years ago, I believe. And it wasn't really that usable. It was kind of cool, especially if you're used to like object selection, or I should say like quick selection in Photoshop. But it didn't work that well for video. It was very flickery from frame to frame. And they released a new version, Rotobrush 2, a couple years ago that really took it a good step further. And then they recently released Rotobrush 3, which is really gotten good, and it uses like machine learning to better roto things. And so you still sometimes need to go in and do some manual adjustments to this, but this automatic rotoscoping or somewhat automatic rotoscoping has become a lot more usable for VFX artists than it used to be. So this is pretty good. We're not as worried about the stuff over here as we are over here in the back where it goes in front of the matte painting. And so you'll see how quick this is as well. Not only is it pretty good, but it's also renders pretty quick. That's pretty amazing, right? Like technology didn't exist a couple years ago, and now you can see how well it's staying with the car. There's this little flicker where it picks up part of the police vehicle, and we could paint that out, but I'm actually not worried about it because that's not going to go in front of our matte painting. So I'm going to go ahead and freeze this. Okay, and then I'm going to do, we'll call this cop car, and then I'm going to, sorry, that's getaway car. I'll just call it car. And then we should not need to do it for the cop car because it's not going to go in front of that matte painting that we set up. At least I don't think it will. But we will need to do it for the cop. So she is really blurry from motion blur, but we're going to try to get, she is very blurry from the motion blur. The one thing that helps us out a bit is that while she is blurry from that, because she's so blurry, if this gets a little wonky, as long as you kind of see this blur running, it will be useful. So I've selected this area of her, and I'm going to go back one frame, and I'm doing that with Control and my left arrow. And you can see this sustained with her pretty well. We don't need this part. So I hold Alt to color the area that we don't need and see if we can pull a little bit of this leg. Hey guys, the live recording cut out there, so I'm going to just pick this up with a voiceover until the end. So what I did there was drag that handle to tell Rotobrush that it's the last frame. It's important, especially if you don't track a certain frame, it'll just have the entire frame visible. So you always want to make sure you drag in and out here to make sure that it's not showing the whole frame on top of all of your other layers if you don't need it to. So it's really important to turn on motion blur here because it is so blurry. Looking at what we have, and I think needing to adjust some of the in and out there, so you can see that if I solo that layer, it's showing the entire thing, and we don't need that. So I'm going to set an in here, and that way the layer starts there, and then this is the last frame right here. And now we have we can see this working. We have our cop running in front of the matte painting, and looks like that's working pretty well. And I actually got some applause during the live presentation here, which is pretty cool. It's always a good feeling to finish a VFX shot, but obviously we want to push this a little further and look for all the fine details. I think I noticed how sharp that roto is, and I'm going to tell that to use motion blur, and I turned up reduced shatter and seeing if that's working any better. Ultimately visual effects sometimes take a lot of little tweaking. Sometimes the base part of the shot takes like 25% of the time, and then 75% of the time is just these little tweaks. I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's like a magic act, just making it believable, and that sometimes just means little tweaks, little masking, whatever you need to do to get it to the to the appropriate finish that you can't tell that it's a visual effects shot. So just to reiterate, what I did was we started with our footage. We had to track our camera eventually, and we created a matte painting in Photoshop using Generative Fill to clean up the streets, which was my little dad joke title for this presentation. And then we applied the track to that matte painting so that the matte painting moved correctly with the shot. And then we rotoscoped the car and the cop running. And to do that, we used Rotobrush, specifically Rotobrush 3, which is the newest version of Rotobrush. And we got some really good, quick results. in this. So here I can show that I turn on motion blur, and once motion blur is turned on, the matte painting looks like it's working a little bit better in our shot. But when we created the reference frame, the reference frame already had some motion blur on it from the original shot, and so we could try to remove that motion blur through some processes. Or what we actually did here was turning down the shutter angle a little bit, and by turning down the shutter angle we'll get less motion blur. And I just felt like this got a little bit of a better result. All of this happened so quickly, but that way we're not applying quite as much motion blur. So turning the shutter angle down from 180 to 90 helped to not make it look too blurry. And this was a great way to solve the shot. But another tool that I wanted to show off is called Mask Prompter. So the reason I showed Rotobrush first is Rotobrush is built into After Effects, and it's really, really good. But Mask Prompter is a third-party tool that in some situations can really save even more time. And frankly, I think it's good to have both tools in your tool belt, if you can afford it. And Mask Prompter is only a $50 plugin and uses like AI machine learning to roto things. And so what you can see here is I drew a mask around the car and just told it to use mask 1 and look at, automatically what a good job it did of grabbing that car. And so if I keyframe this mask, I can just keyframe it from where the car goes, and Mask Prompter will, kind of figure out the object that it needs to be tracking and rotoing. And for this shot, Mask Prompter did an absolutely fantastic job. And one of the cool things about Mask Prompter as well is that you can rotoscope multiple objects at once with multiple masks, and so we can see here this is really doing a nice job already. And we can turn it to high quality, and we have a couple options. Detailed matte, which detailed matte didn't do a great job on this specific shot, but it's definitely worth toggling through some of the different options. High quality did a little bit of a better job. You see it's not quite perfect at the top there, but I believe that part is actually the matte painting is a little bit below those telephone wires. So this is doing a pretty good job already. But I'm going to delete this mask, and I accidentally deleted a point from the single mask, and Mask Prompter was really not happy with me. But another cool thing that you can do with Mask Prompter is actually use a text input, which is such a cool thing to be able to do inside of After Effects. So text input, basically you click add text input and it creates a mask that you just name the mask whatever you'd like. So I'm going to just type car, and I'm going to tell it that is my text input. And you can see how amazing that is, that it's sticking with the car. And it looks like it wanted to pull the car in the background for a second there, which is a little strange. But if we change our prompt to car in foreground, it looks like it's going to stay pretty good with this getaway car. And this again is so cool to me that a simple text prompt can rotoscope a moving vehicle like this. And so it looks like I was pointing out that that area at the top, and that doesn't cross in front of our matte painting. So that's certainly something that we could try to clean up. But for this shot specifically, it might not matter. We are more concerned about the edge of the car. So looking at the police officer running across, I think that might have been a little hard to give it a prompt for that, especially for how quickly and how blurry she is running. But I think we're going to use this point prompt here. So this works a lot like keyframing the mask, but it's going to allow us to just use a single point controller on the screen. And you see it's doing a pretty good job of picking it up. And now I'm going to keyframe that being active. That way the point's not always active. So here it picks up active for these couple of frames. And, again, this may not be totally perfect, but, for this, we just need a couple frames of seeing a bit of the blur of her running. And I think this is going to be enough. So, we can now see our matte with the two of these. And so we're going to set that as a matte for our matte painting, and we'll set it to luminance and invert it. And so you can see now this is working pretty well. And, she's probably a little sharp because of how blurry she is. And it looks like there's some artifacting going on in the background as well. So if we turn this on, we can probably get a sense of what's going on here, but she's definitely too sharp compared to how blurry she is, how motion blurry she is. So, and then we're also getting this flicker back here. And in the end, it just took, messing around with the settings of Mask Prompter a little bit to get a much more stable result. I know that I ended up separating the cop and blurring her layer a little bit, and that way I had it separate from the cop, and I pre-composed those and used those as a matte, and it ended up working really well. So the next part of my presentation, I swapped over to showing some of the other visual effects shots that I did. And so these are some of the muzzle flashes that I worked on, and this was from a semi-automatic M4 gun. And what was really cool about this is ActionVFX has the exact kind of muzzle flashes that match this. So when I originally was working on these, I used some action essentials that I had from back in the day, and they didn't necessarily match the gun, but they looked kind of cool. And by using the exact kind of muzzle flashes that they have, I was able to actually more accurately match it with the gun. And so, of course, I looked at a lot of references for this, as well as you can see shells flying behind the actor. And so I actually used Mask Prompter in this shot as well to get a kind of a rough matte of the actor. And so that just allowed the shells to fly behind him in a really easy way without having to do a lot of work to rotoscope our actor. You can also see some of the interactive lighting on his hand and on the on his hoodie there on his arm. So this is the original muzzle flash that I had used, and this is just kind of a generic gun muzzle flash. And still kind of looks cool, but it's not quite as accurate to the semi-automatic weapon that was used on set. And here's a look at some of those ActionVFX elements. And you see some of the semi-automatic and automatic footage clips that you can purchase from ActionVFX. And so this is this is one of the ones that I used for this for the the front shot that we'll look at next. And I think I used a variety actually of the automatic and semi-automatic for multi-firing versus just layering single instances of the semi-automatic. And speaking of ActionVFX, they have all kinds of really cool elements. I want to give a big shout out to Luke from ActionVFX for even donating some prizes during the live presentation. And I've recently used some of these fire elements in our Halloween VFX shot that you can also find on our YouTube channel. And they have some really cool smoke elements and just really neat things. What impresses me most is the variety of stock elements that they have for visual effects. They're releasing new packs every day, which I think is so cool. And yeah, here you can see some of those fire elements. Again, from what was available back in the day, you know, you used to have some sort of generic fire element, and now they have all these really unique things like fire climbing up a wall from a side angle, an alternative fire climbing up a wall. So, you know, all of the films out there using them don't all look the same, and all of the fire doesn't look like it's just repeated. And here you can see another visual effects shot that we did with a little spark element with a gun, you know, shooting at the cop car. And then this was one of the really cool shots. And this was, you know, using some of those muzzle flashes on the gun. You can see some smoke dissipating in the air, as well as the shells flying. And then you can also see even I have this this light, this kind of rim light that's reflecting in the eyes of the robber as he's shooting the gun, and it's a, you know, it's a subtle effect that kind of adds something to it. And you know, we had some interactive lighting on his hoodie as well in that shot, and then you know, another spark coming off the car, and you know, here you can see. This is another, you know, very similar to the first shot. And I actually added this digital blink because he, you know, it seemed unrealistic that he would be keeping his eyes open the whole time. And so, you know, that and the muzzle flash actually happens. Most of them happen off screen for this shot, but you know, you kind of buy into it with his blinking, which actually is an idea I got from ActionVFX, and the interactive lighting on his hoodie, kind of, and his hands. You can see all those there. His knuckles lighting up. You can see kind of the interaction from the gun really helps sell the shot. And yeah, for the eye, I believe I used Photoshop. Might have done a little generative fill to create a blink, and then I think I used like a liquefy effect to kind of do the in between frames of the blink. It's a little video gamey, but it happens really quick, and I think it sells it pretty well. And then we have this shot here, where, you know, we see a little bit of gun smoke and muzzle flash. You know, one of the big things is that you want the gun smoke to follow the camera. So after the muzzle flash, wherever the gun is placed, you want to see the smoke, you know, continue, you know, just wherever that flash happened. You know, it shouldn't necessarily follow the gun after that shot happens. And here I'm pointing out, you know, I put a little reflection because with this giant muzzle flash, you know, I think we would see a little bit of it in the reflection over his head. The LUT that was on this to preview these made it a little dark to see. That's why I turned that off. And then here we had some of these shots that we already looked at, and this one was something that happened the day of shooting. I guess someone walked around the corner here. It just looked, you know, when I saw the rough cut, I suggested doing this because it seemed to me like maybe it was someone on set who was standing back there. It actually wasn't. It was just a random person standing back there, but you know, it brought my attention away from our actors, making me think that had something to do with our story when it didn't. So that was a really, you know, easy VFX shot, but it kind of helped support the overall narrative and kind of help you focus on our two police characters as they're getting the call. So I guess I should let you watch the final film. Enjoy, and I will see you here next time on our YouTube channel.
Southwest units, all units, citizens report officer needs help, 3742 West Martin Luther King Boulevard.
43 stopping the vehicle, Central and 40th Place.
Requesting assistance. We have a 211 in progress at St. Clair Savings and Loans.
description, adding striping to a black Cadillac four-door, possibly exchanging plates, vehicle license Utah 2904, California Paul William Nora 011.
Put down the weapon!
Where's the car?
I repeat, put down the weapon!
Shit!